Howdy, folks, and welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast. I'm your host, Michael, and as usual, we got another good one for you today. Today, we actually connect with Bryan Speller. Bryan is a listener who had the guts, the balls, or whatever you want to call it, to reach out to me and say, "Hey, man, love your podcast." He actually found a connection with Jermaine Hodge, who's been on the podcast several times before, because they're both military. But he was brave enough to reach out and say, "Hey, I've got some stories I want to tell." So, to the listeners, if you have some stories, take a hint from Bryan and reach out to me. I'd love to have you on. But I want to say thank you to Bryan for reaching out and for sharing his stories. Beyond that, guys, we're now live on Carbon TV Media. So please go check us out there. It's going to be kind of a rolling release where the episodes come out one every day, but still new ones every Monday. But just one more place that we're spreading the good word and some good stories. Beyond that, guys, let's go ahead and kick this thing off. Let Bryan tell you some of his stories. Thank you.
All right, Bryan. Welcome to the Hunting Stories Podcast, brother. How are you?
I'm pretty good, man. How are you?
I am doing well, man. I'm doing well. Bryan, you are another one of the listeners who reached out and said, "Man, I've got some fun stories. I'd love to come on." And here we are, man. So thank you so much for reaching out, being brave enough to share your stories with not only me, but the people that listen to the podcast, man. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I just saw your story about Western Hunt Fest and was like, let's see what, yeah, I'll go to that. Sure.
You
See what's
should.
up.
You should. It's a hell of an event.
Uh,
Last year, I had tickets to go, and I got COVID, and I couldn't fly there. But I plan on going to, I think they have 5 of them this year. So I'm going to try and make it to at least
they got
2.
one right here on the Air Force Academy.
Yeah, no, I'm going to be at that one for sure because
So,
my hunting buddy lives about 5 minutes from there. So if you're going to be there, Bryan, let's meet up.
oh
But
yeah,
let's
yeah, I'll be
let's
there.
pause for a second on all that, and why don't we introduce you, sir, to the people that are listening so they know who they're hearing some stories from.
Yeah, so my name is Bryan Speller. I've been hunting since I was 4 years old. I shot a squirrel. Quick aside, when I was a kid, I could always find my little red wheel or bow with 2 wheels on it, and I could never find an arrow at the same time. And I remember the day I gained consciousness, I would say, was like I remember being in my front yard, seeing a squirrel and seeing it was close in the tree, and remembering where I had put the arrow the last time I saw it, and having the bow already. So I remembered to slide under my garage door as a 4-year-old, and I ran in there, grabbed the arrow uh, out of my dad's bow case, and ran back and shot that squirrel in the foot, pinned him to the tree for a second, and he took off. And then my dad was watching the whole thing through the window, and so he's got like we bring the arrow in. There's like a hair on it, and they're flipping out. They can't believe a 4-year-old just shot this squirrel with a bow. And
I'd be so
so,
proud.
oh yeah, he was stoked. But yeah, so a little bit about me, man. I kind of lived all over the place growing up. I wasn't like a military brat or nothing. My dad was just in his career. So, um, we I've lived in Michigan, Indiana, Alabama, Tennessee, and I graduated in Tennessee. Went to school, was an idiot, and went to college. And I put college in parentheses because, but
Yeah,
so I dropped
I
out,
can
joined
see
the
you doing the
army.
air quotes right now, right?
Yeah, yep. And so I dropped out, joined the army, and I got stationed in Washington, Fort Lewis, Washington. And the first thing I did when I found out I was being stationed there is Google or YouTube over-the-counter elk hunting in Washington. I knew they had it because I had a friend that lived in down by the Oregon border in Vancouver,
Yeah.
and so I got with him, and that kind of set that journey off as far as my Western hunting is concerned. But I grew up whitetail hunting, with a bow. I shot my first one at 10, shot another one at 11, and killed one at 12. Killed two at 12 with a bow, and um, I killed probably one a year, two a year, every year since. Um, and I never really uh I never killed a big one for a while.
Yeah.
And then I killed one when I was 15. That was a big. We were in Alabama at the time. Yeah, Alabama, and I killed a big one. during the youth season, my last youth season, which I this is kind of a aside. I don't know how I was 15 years old hunting during the youth season. I felt like I had every advantage a grown man had, but whatever. Um, took it. So, um, yeah, that's kind of my background. Avid fly
Cool.
fisherman, bass fisherman, everything outside, duck hunting, especially duck hunting,
And you do you
turkey
bounce back and
hunting.
forth between Washington and Colorado, or are you in Colorado at this point?
I'm a resident of Colorado. I'm a
Okay,
resident of
got it.
Colorado now.
Got it.
So,
Cool, man. Very cool. Well, you know what's
yeah.
awesome is that your first memory is of hunting. I wish I could say that. I don't like. I'd have to think back. It's probably like jumping in leaf piles. Probably about the same age of about 4, but that's pretty. That's a pretty impressive little hunting story that a 4-year-old little Bryan was shooting a squirrel with his bow. I've shot a squirrel with my bow, and I think that's impressive. And I did it at like 38. So good on you, Bryan.
Yeah.
Man, that's pretty awesome. But cool, man. It's nice to understand a little bit about where you come from. So let's just jump into it. So I know you have a couple stories for us today. Why don't you set the stage on the first one? I think you said it has a little bit to do with kind of the lineage of your family and some hunting land. So let's dive into it.
Yeah, man. So, yeah, I remember being 7 and 8 and 9 years old, like thinking and my dad would go on these trips every week with his brothers and my uncles, to Ohio. And we didn't, so I have family that lives in Ohio that they would go hunt with. And we didn't have anywhere really that we hunted. We had permission, or they had permission on some
Yeah,
places, and that's where they would go hunt. They would kill some good deer every year. And these weren't, you know, everyone's kind of I want almost want to say spoiled. Like now you get on Instagram and you see a 165-inch deer and you don't even bat an eye, but like what you don't realize is like that's the new normal. You know what I mean? That's the new thing that people are just going out and shooting these monster deer. Um, People have always killed monster deer. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that, but you never saw it like this. So,
yeah,
um, and they're killing these 130, 140-inch deer, and um, my dad would come home, with the rack or like the story, and then take it to the taxidermist. And I remember like being a kid, like, take me, take me, take me. And I remember when I was 10, he decided he was like, I shot my bow. I had a Browning Micro Midas, and I'd shoot that bow every single day. I mean, for hours, just I didn't play video games or nothing like that. I just shot. And my
yeah.
dad, I guess that was the year he was like, it's time to go. And so he took me. That year I got a Diamond Edge, same bow every kid starts with. And I think we went to Michigan that year because my uncle was living in Kalamazoo at the time. So we went to Michigan. I shot a deer in the butt at 8 yards at 10 years old. And then that same deer ran past my grandpa, who then missed it. And there's probably a deer somewhere, or a carcass now somewhere in southern Michigan with a East End 5570 in the side of it that I shot at 8 yards. But I shot that deer the next year. I had a big buck at 11 o'clock in the afternoon on the last day of the hunt. Comes into 15 yards, and I draw back, and looking back, I had target panic. Obviously as a kid, you're not comprehending what you is going on, especially when it's that. And I was like, what pin do I put on this deer that's 15 yards away? I'm gonna put the green, red, and yellow one on him and let it fly. And I shot that deer right in the back strap, and he took off and survived. And then when I was 12, that's so after that year, my uncle Todd got a farm in uh in Ohio, and not a big one. It's small. It's maybe 65 acres total.
hmm
But it's in a very good place because the land behind it isn't hunted at all. So
Interesting.
it's like
Okay.
this sanctuary that we're up against. And that year my cousin killed his first deer after I had backstrapped one. And I remember my other cousin had killed one, and I was like the last one up because we're all the same age. So I was like the last one to go. And I remember like telling my dad because we had the opportunity to go rifle hunting in Alabama when we lived there, and I didn't want to. I wanted to do it with a bow. I remember that, and not that I thought the rifle was going to be too easy or anything like that. I just knew I started with the bow. I had to do it with the bow. And my dad, once I made that kind of commitment to myself, he enforced it. You know what I mean? Like, no, you know. And
Yeah. That's awesome.
so when I was 12, we had to stand in the top or the north section of the farm. So there's four fields. If you could picture a grid, you got the line in the middle and on each side is a field of some sort, like a cornfield or green. It was a green field this year, and uh, in the middle is a block of woods, and to each adjacent corner is a block of woods. And so, to which my uncle owns probably 25 to 40 yards in each, except for the one that's solely there. There's like a couple patches he's got that are solely there that are his. And so, I was sitting in a double ladder saying the same one my cousin had killed his first deer out of. It was a small 8 point. And I remember like sitting there and I was so cold, man. And I was so cold. And I was like, I'm not even gonna be able to draw my bow back. What am I doing here? And so I was like, I should draw my bow back and see. And I kind of got up to do that and I couldn't get it back. So I hung the bow back up. And I was like, well, I'm gonna sit the rest of the morning and then next time I know not to wear so many clothes because now I'm cold and I can't move. So I I remember watching across to the opposite corner of the field, and I was watching this deer. And you remember those first couple times when you were hunting, when you'd see a deer, especially because like I was 12 and I was hunting by myself. So I mean, my dad was also hunting on the same farm. It's not like he just dropped me off in the woods, but I walked
Yeah.
one way from the house, he walked the other, and I
Yeah.
had a phone. So
Well, this
um,
is new to me. I mean, you say I remember, but I am a new hunter. So I've only been hunting for a handful of years. So this is
but you
all
remember
new.
the first time you saw a deer though while you were hunting, right?
I do. I do. I
Yeah,
didn't have a
and it
deer
was
tag, but I do
you were
remember the
like,
first time I
whoa,
saw an elk when I had an elk tag, and I was like,
yes,
"Oh my
it's on,
god!"
it's on.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, and I remember watching that deer come through, and it was two does, and I watched her come through a hole in that tree line, kind of a little trail they had cut through, and I took a very good mental note of it, and I took a picture of it, and I remember getting back to the house because my cousin had sat there the day before and seen deer that were far away too, and there was a tree stand at the house, which is also on the property.
okay,
Yep. And so my I told my dad, I was like, "Hey, I want to put this stand up." He's like, "Do you know where?" I was like, "Yeah, I keep seeing deer right here. I want to go put this stand up." And I hate to make a long story short, but it's gonna evolve in the evolution of this story of this farm. So, um, we go out there and we put this stand up at 12 o'clock in the middle of the day, and he's like, "You feel comfortable in it? Are you good?" And we walk back to the house to eat lunch. And I remember sitting there eating lunch, and I could not wait to get in that tree. I couldn't. I mean, something was telling me I had to be there. You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
my dad, I got up early from eating lunch. He's like, "Where are you going?" I said, I'm gonna go sit." He's like, "You're gonna go sit in that tree right now? It's 1:30 in the afternoon." I said, "Yes." I put all my stuff on, put my harness on, and start walking out there. Get to the tree, climb the tree, pull my bow up. And I remember I would always take a picture of the deer because as a kid, like no one believes you, like, "Oh, I saw this many deer." And so I'd get back to the house and they'd be like, "No, you didn't." And I'd be like, "No, look, I did. Look." And so
yeah,
uh I had I didn't have a rangefinder, so I walked out to 20 yards from the tree stand. I stepped out 20 yards and I drew a 2-0 in the field. And I stepped out to 30 and I drew a 3-0 in the field. And I knew that 30 was the farthest I was going to shoot. And I'm sitting there for man, like it's like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So it's not exactly prime time, you know what I mean? And I was just sitting there for 20
yeah.
minutes and I kind of looked up and there's this button buck quartered away, standing where I had just kicked the dirt up in the 20. And so I drew back and I remember like I was like, this time you're not gonna put all your pins on him. You're gonna put the pin on him and shoot. It's not gonna be a Oh shoot, it's gonna be a settle down, let that, let it go. And so I did, and I shot that deer, and he was hard quartered away. I put it right behind his last rib. He didn't drop a lick of blood, but I watched him run off into the next field. And I remember as I lost sight of him, I could just see his tail waving. And so I got down about 20 minutes after that, and I kind of started walking, following his tracks because there was no blood. And I remember I was like, I'm just gonna walk to where I last saw him. Hopefully, there's a speck of blood. Because you gotta remember, I've been down this road twice. So,
Yeah.
and I just remember like crossing the little in this green field, just coming up, and there's this little knoll that's never flat. And so
Yeah.
I looked over. I said, "Oh my God, there's a dead deer right there with my arrow in it." So I
Oh, I
called
bet
my
that felt
dad.
amazing.
Dude, I was 12 years old. I was alone. And so I called my dad. I was like, "Dad, I just killed one. I just killed one." He freaks out. Obviously, he's like, "Did you see it go down?" I said, "No, I'm standing next to it. It's dead. It's dead. I killed it." So he comes over
I'm proud of you
and
right now, Brian. That's amazing. Okay. Keep going. Keep
thank
going.
well, and so he sits in that tree for the rest of the evening, and we go back. We eat the back straps. I remember we did some weird marinade, like soaked it in pickle juice or whatever, something like that to eat
Yeah.
it, and it was so good. I remember being like, "This is backstrap. This is what they talk about when they tell these stories." And so 2 days later, my grandpa comes in, and I go sit back in the same stand. I still had another tag, for a buck
Oh
or a
boy.
doe, and killed
Yeah.
two does, and I technically a buck's antlerless. So I go back in the stand, and this time I put a 10 in the field. And so I had bought myself, I saved up all my money that summer and bought myself a Trophy Ridge Pursuit sight. For those of you listening that know what that is, it's like the cheap version of a slider, like a Hog Father or
Yeah.
an XL. And so um, I slapped that on my bow in the summertime. And so I had marked my little ranges. It was so funny because looking back, it was so dumb that I had this slider sight on this 50-pound bow because the only two I had three notches, where I drew on the tape for 10, 20, and 30, and that was the farthest it would go down. So um just because as a kid you don't have I don't have a draw length at all. I'm shooting 21-inch draw. So um and well, I'm sitting there, my grandpa's sitting in that double ladder stand directly across from me. I can see him, he can see me. He's on one tree line, I'm on the other. And this doe comes out, and my uncle had missed her, and I knew he had missed this doe because she had a giant mole on her face, and he had talked about it. And so this doe comes out, and she's right underneath me when I see her. And I'm like, oh crap. Because it's breaking dawn, you know what I mean? It's bright early in the morning, it's still cold. And my grandpa was like, I wonder if he's gonna shoot. And he was like, why hasn't he shot? He doesn't know that during this time I'm still putting my release on. And I sneak my release on and grab my bow, knock an arrow, and somehow this doe hasn't spooked. And she steps out at 10 underneath this little tree beside me, and I smoked her. And I spined her, actually. That was interesting because like I said, I had the slider sight that I had never moved from 20 yards, and I shot her at less than 10. So, I spine her, get down, shoot her again. And so that was like that was my little checkmate to my other cousins who had killed deer before me. Was I did it with a bow and I killed two of them. And that was I got that monkey off my back, so to speak. And uh, moving down the line in 2013, uh, my dad we had finally had like a giant deer show up on camera, and we all called him Big Nasty. And my dad missed him
Love
on the
deer
very
names.
first day hanging the stand.
Yeah.
I go back and forth about them. Like, I think some of them are like, I think like the TV industry has kind of taken the deer naming thing so far. Like, they're giving these deer like people names. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
going after Frank today. So I'm going after Ben today. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that's a little
That's a little
silly,
weird.
but
Yeah.
the-
So I have a
you
bunch of
see,
deer in my yard, and I let my kids name
Right?
them, and it's fun to see them grow. So my son was determined to have the biggest deer named Bingo, and so then we just ran off of that. And so there was Bingo, and then Lingo, who's littler than Bingo, but still pretty good, and then
Makes sense.
Rhino, yeah, because he only had one horn. But was as big as Bingo. It's a fun little thing to do, especially with your kids. But
Yeah.
yeah, naming them like Frank,
You
Carl,
got the yeah,
Steve.
it's fun with the yeah, it's fun like with your kids and stuff, but like you got these grown men out here with 40 deer on their 400-acre lease and they've got them all named. It's like, all right. I mean, if that's what gets you going,
Yeah,
more
it's like
power to
Santa's
you.
reindeer, man. But
Yeah.
yeah, continue. Sorry.
So, yeah, we had Big Nasty show up and I mean, at the time, this was the biggest deer we had ever seen on camera. I mean, we are like on go mode for this deer. The first day there, November, we had went this midweek, mid first to second week this time, so it was like November 8th. And my dad was hanging the stand that we now call Big Nasty and missed him at 20 yards. He was in there bedded with a doe while he was hanging the stand, and they surprised each other. And he calls me all shook up. And that year, I missed a giant that was completely different from the same stand I had killed the two in 2012. And this was, I think, I want to say this is 2013,
Okay.
maybe 2014. Yeah, something like that. It's been so long now. But um, he calls me and he misses him. And so fast forward after I missed that deer, I'm hunting and it's like the second to last evening. We had just gotten a snowstorm and my dad ends up killing him from the same spot he missed him. Uh,
No way.
and that deer's, yeah, and that was the biggest deer we had ever seen. Body wise, neck wise, I mean, and he was 160 something inches,
Oh wow.
not a big, I'm not really a big score guy, but like I love when they just have those thick horns, man. Like I'd love to shoot a Roosevelt one day that didn't even score 250, but just had those bases. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think that's the coolest part of an antler is right there at the base. But so in Big
I gotta
Nasty had
show you
those.
I gotta show you my whitetail that I got a South Texas whitetail, and his bases and his brow tines are just super cool. Like one of them is just bending straight backwards, his brow tines,
Yeah,
and it's just covered with all sorts of stuff. And like he was, if I had to guess, he was 3 years old. If we let him go to seven, he would have been a monster. He was a 3 year old and probably one. I've never measured him, but I'm guessing about 120, maybe like 125.
right.
And he would have been a monster at 170. But I was hunting public land in Texas. I was happy to just see a deer.
I didn't even know there was public land in Texas. So
Yeah, right.
there you go. Yeah. But so my dad kills Big Nasty, and I think my next year was my freshman year in high school, and I shot like a smaller, like 6 point,
Yeah.
and but my uncle, who's not really my uncle, is my dad's cousin, so he's my uncle. His nephew, uh, who's not me, during the shotgun season. So Ohio's cool because it's 1 buck a year, and they have only a straight wall cartridge or shotgun season. It's only like there's only 2 weeks out of the whole season you can hunt with a gun, so it gives the bucks a chance to grow.
Okay.
And which doesn't sound important until you realize like Ohio, every one deer hunts. It's not like Colorado, you have like a 1 in 50, it's a 50-50 shot if someone hunts when you meet them. Probably less than that. There, it's
Probably less
everybody.
than that. Yeah.
The whole Midwest
Huh.
is like that.
I
So,
did not know that. I did know that like opening day of rifle is like a holiday, and people don't go to school and stuff like that. But I didn't know that there's that many hunters.
oh,
That's pretty
it's
awesome.
crazy. It's crazy. Um, so during the shotgun season, my uh, uncle's nephew Isaac shoots with a shotgun a deer that scores 173 inches. The same, I think it was the same year as Big Nasty. And a key detail to this that we'll circle back to is when the deer was dead on the ground and Todd was looking at my uncle and they're both hunting. Um, his neck was kinked up because he was so wide. He wouldn't lay flat.
Hmm.
And I mean the deer is as wide as my shoulders and just monster of a deer. And so fast forward to 2017, yeah, 20 no 2016, my dad goes, um, I think he left the house. He got to my uncle's house at 5 a.m., shot his bow after driving to make sure it was on in the headlights of the car. And then, I mean, I think he got his tag at Walmart too, because Walmart used to be 24 hours back then. And
Yeah.
so,
Some of them still are.
he got his tag, hunted, and so leading up to that, my Uncle Brian, who I'm named after, had just called him and said, "Hey, I just saw the biggest deer I've ever seen in my life." And my dad goes out and probably 20 minutes into hunting shoots that deer from Big Nasty at 40 yards. The same spot. That's another key detail is Big Nasty. And
So the big nasty at this point not being the deer, but
it's a
being the name of
stand,
the
yes.
stand. Yeah. Okay.
Yes, it's the tree that we that's the one where usually if you're gonna kill a big one, it happens. So he shoots this deer and it's got a freak like caribou paddle for a brow tine. It's an awesome looking deer. I'll have to find a picture
That's so
and send
cool.
it to you afterwards. But that deer is like 170 something inches, but he's got the same neck and face as Big Nasty. You know, you can tell they're related. So it's really cool. He's like the offspring of the one he had killed. And
That's cool.
so 2017, we didn't kill any big ones. In 2018, was my first year in college, and I remember that summer I bought a new bow to me. It was a Bowtech experience. I still shoot it. Bought a whole set of arrows, everything, and I told myself like I was working in Michigan at the time as an electrician's apprentice before I went to college. Before I decided I wanted to give college a quote unquote try. Um,
Okay.
and I remember like practicing. I used to shoot at the same shop. I don't know if you are familiar with him. Sure you are, but
I'm actually I might have
I used
missed
to shoot
that.
at
I
the same
think
shop as him.
is who?
Chris B.
Crispy. Okay. Yeah. No, I'm familiar with Crispy.
Yeah, so I used to shoot at the same shop as him, Three Rivers Archery in I think it's Livonia, Michigan. But I
Okay.
remember shooting like the little jackpot league there, like doing everything I can to get ready for the hunt. And so that year we go down, first week in November, and I told myself like, this is the year you're gonna shoot a giant. Like, don't shoot a small one. You know what I mean? Like, if
Yeah.
you have to question it, it's not you're not shooting it. And that's I hate to say that because like that makes me sound greedy, but like the thing is I think every kind of hunter gets into this progression of it stops being about like I know I can go out and harvest a deer, you know what I mean? Like I don't have to prove it to myself I can do that every year, so I'm okay with being picky, you know. And it's not like I'm trophy hunting. Maybe I am trophy hunting in the sense, but I think there's a challenge involved in holding out for a specific animal.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And beyond the fact that they are smarter, right? The longer they've been
yeah, they're
around,
a
usually
harder
the
animal
bigger
to
they
hunt.
are. Yeah, they've been around. They understand what it takes to be alive. So it is
Exactly.
not just about the trophy, which the trophy is a wonderful byproduct,
Wonderful byproduct, but
wonderful byproduct, but it's really
it's the
about the
challenge.
chase. Yeah, the
Yeah,
challenge.
it's the
Exactly.
chase. And there's a good quote, real quick, by a guy. I can't recall his name off the top of my head at the end of the podcast, though I have it in my notes, so I'll give it back to you so he gets his credit. But it's a turkey hunter, and one of his quote is, "I wish that I could breathe life back into him so that I could hunt him again tomorrow." And I that sticks with me because I think the hunt to me is more of what it's about. But anyways, so um, I decided I was gonna hunt Big Nasty at the stand every single day. I wasn't gonna leave it. You know what I mean? Like I'm hunting there. That's where the big deer are.
Yeah.
I don't even want to leave nothing to chance. And so my first, we were there for 7, 8 days. Um, my first all but
Ben
one of
Rogers
those
Lee. I
days,
googled it,
Ben
but
Rogers
yes,
Lee. That's it. That's
Ben
it.
Rogers Lee. Yeah.
Um, so those first, so the first morning I sat in the stand, to the south or to the east of Big Nasty, uh, on the biggest woodlot there, like called Ninja. And we call it Ninja because you have to be a ninja to get into this tree stand. I don't know how my uncles were hanging tree stands back in the day. I know they probably don't do that anymore, but they used to. I mean, like ninjas. I was 18 years old. I could barely get into that tree,
Okay.
and but it was about 10 feet into the wood line on the edge of a cornfield where the first two rows had been cut. So I could see about 40 yards into the cornfield, and the edge of the trees are all about sapling level trees. You know what I mean? Like where the deer can make a scrape, and there's a hot scrape right there. So I sat there the very first morning because my dad wanted to sit Big Nasty because last time he sat there the very first morning, he killed the biggest deer of his life. So I go there that afternoon. Uh, I think I saw maybe one or two bucks and chasing does, and it was a good hunt. It was a good sit, but I didn't see any big ones. And the next morning, uh, I went to climb the stand, and as I'm climbing, I got there late, like it was breaking. I like to be there before daylight, so
Okay.
it was daylight. It was shooting light when I got in the tree, so it was or becoming shooting light. That twilight period, if you kind of, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know what you're
So
talking about.
I'm
Absolutely.
climbing
Yeah.
the tree. Yeah, so I'm climbing the tree and I'm looking to the back side of the tree and there's a doe, but she's not looking at me. I know she hears me, but she's not looking at me. I know she's heard me walking. And I kind of peer up behind the tree and there's about 135, 140-inch buck on her. And they
Okay.
are, I mean, he's 40 yards, she's 30, and they're going to work their way towards me if I get into this tree. And keep in mind, I'm climbing up the other side, so they can't see me. So I get to the
Okay.
top,
Got it.
pull my bow up. I hook my harness up, pull the bow up, knock an arrow, and I remember looking at this deer that I had somehow gotten to the tree stand now, and he's still there, tending this doe. And I remember looking at him like, that's a big deer, but not yet. You know what I mean? Like it's like the fourth day, and I just couldn't do it. You know what I mean? Something was telling me to hold out, and
You got a good
I
gut feeling,
hunted.
I'm hoping here, Brian.
Yeah.
I'm
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not good
And
enough hunter to hold out on anything, but you keep going, man.
so that I sat all day that day, and that afternoon I saw one, and I ran out of light as he was giving me, and he was a big one, man. He was probably that quality, that age class of deer that we're looking for, and I just ran out of light. So the next morning I hunt there, the next evening I hunt there, didn't see another deer, and the next day was the last day. Now all my big deer encounters there, aside from that one in the morning, I had seen deer far away, you know what I mean, but I
Yeah.
hadn't. Closest ones have been in the evening, aside from the one in the morning that I passed, as far as like shooters are concerned. And
Yeah.
my uncle wanted to hunt there, right? And he's older than me. And my dad's telling me, he's like, man, you your uncle hunt there. I'm like, no, 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 no. Let me hunt there in the morning tomorrow. Then you can hunt it in the afternoon. See, I thought after saying this, I realized I had made a fatal mistake because every encounter I had was in the afternoon where I could possibly shoot one. It was like middle of the day afternoon. And so I was like, well, I'm gonna hunt ninja for the last day. And my cousin, who was like 13, he was actually shooting my old bow. He is, I'm hunting ninja, and he's hunting crazy eight is another stand we have, and he's probably 200 yards farther east of me. So you've got him on this tree line slash block of woods on kind of watching the same cornfield. Me about 200, 250 up from him, right? And then my dad is like perpendicular to me in the very corner of this field, right?
Okay.
And then Big Nasty is the farthest from me. So we're all kind of not on this tree line, like close enough to like see each other, but we're all in that same group of woods. And I remember it was the last evening. It was the very last evening. And it was so windy, man. Like we're walking out, and I just remember having a smile on my face because I was like, this is my last day here for the year. Like I'm gonna enjoy this night whether I see a deer. Like tonight's not about shooting a deer to me. I've had my hunt. I hope my uncle kills one at a big nasty tonight, but I'm gonna go sit in ninja and I'm just gonna sit on that scrape and whatever happens, happens. It's so windy that I'm not concerned about a deer smelling me, like it is blowing.
Yeah.
And So I get into the stand, I drop my so I make a loop and drop my cousin off at his stand. So I make sure like he gets in there safely and everything. He's tied in, with his harness and get his bow and everything. And I get in my stand and we all have a group chat, like group text message. And
Okay, that's smart.
yeah, yeah. It's so fun in November too, because like this year I haven't been able to go for a couple years because of the military, but I'm in the group chat, so every morning I'm dead asleep and just you seen a deer, you know what I mean? Like, and
Wake up to 70 text. Yeah, that's awesome.
oh yeah, oh more than that, oh dude, hundreds, but every little update they give. So my I'm sitting there for about I want to say an hour or two. It was getting, let's say dark would be 5:30, right? Is
Okay,
completely like shooting lights over at 5:30. It's probably 3:45.
okay,
And
plenty of time.
my dad calls me, he's like, "Hey, yeah, so my dad calls me, he's like, "Hey, I think your cousin just shot one and I think he spined it. You need to make sure." He's like, because like as a kid, especially if it's your first deer, spining one, it's hard to watch a deer die, and I have a lot of remorse seeing it, even though it's a necessary thing for the hunt to happen and for the harvest to happen. It's still like it is hard to watch, you know what I mean? Especially if you're 13 years old and you shoot one in the spine and you have to shoot it again, you know? And I get there, he didn't shoot it in the spine. He shot it in the femoral artery, and the deer was dead before it hit the ground. But he's looking at his first deer, right? And I'm like, we're high fiving. I get his picture for him and for his dad, and I send it in the group chat. And the driveway is about 300 yards away, and it runs parallel to this tree line. And it's the opposite of where we're hunting, the road into the farm.
Okay.
And we call my Uncle Tom, who is my Uncle Todd's dad, and he's like three. So he gets on the tractor and pulls down the driveway, and I drag Chase's deer, my little cousin, but drag it to the road with him. And like before they go back, because they're gonna ride the tractor back to the house. They're like, "Hey, you want to come on back and start, working on the deer?" And I was like, "Nah, man, I got 45 minutes of daylight left in this hunt before I gotta go home for another year. I'm just gonna go sit it out." And ooh, I'm shaking. But
Well,
I
that's
get
good.
to
That's good. Keep going, man.
I yeah, I'm walking back to the stand, and corn rows you can see a long way up them. And I remember looking as I'm getting close to my stand. I'm creeping back to my stand because I'm walking back during the prime time. You know what I mean? Like I should be in the stand right now if I was
Yeah.
really concerned about killing a deer. And I look up a corner and I see a deer and it's big. I can't tell. I can't see horns. I can't see any of that. I just know it's a big bodied deer that I'm looking at 300 yards up this corn row. And well, probably less than that, but you know what I'm saying. A long way up this corner, and it's so windy inside the corn you can't hear anything. And it's windy enough in the woods that they'd have to be close for me to hear him walking on dry leaves. So I climb back in my stand, I hook back up and knock my arrow and everything. And I had made some noise getting in there. So, and I'm not saying this is what brought this deer in at all. I rattled because I was like, I made some noise. I might as well leave a deer noise to maybe settle the nerve of whatever was close. And it's getting so dark as say 5:30, right? It's probably 5:05. I stand up in my tree. I don't like to sit down in a tree stand because then I have to stand up to shoot. And I don't like shooting them having to sit down because you could possibly hit your knee or whatever. It's just easier to be standing up and I can see what's going on.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
I remember kind of looking, and if you remember how I described Ninja, there's these row of saplings on the edge of the field, and there's a hot scrape probably 25 yards away to my like peripheral. I'm not looking out into the field. I'm looking down the tree line. And I remember seeing an ear flick. And I'm sure you've been in the woods long enough to know like there's times when you see something and you're like that's what I'm looking at right now. Like I'm looking at a deer right now. Even though you don't see the whole thing, you're like that I knew in my head I was like that was a deer.
Yeah.
And so I grabbed my bow and I remember seeing the ear flick, and I remember, it's not dark, but it's getting dark. It's getting twilight to where, um, color is not popping anymore. And you got to remember the color of the antler tine of a deer is roughly the same color as a cornfield. So I'm looking at this deer and I see the bases move and I was like, shooter. Instantly, I was like, that's a shooter. And he's 25 when I see him. He's gonna walk. He's making his way towards me. You know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah.
So he's gonna end up at if he keeps coming the road he's coming on, he's gonna be at 5 yards. I mean, he's gonna be
Okay.
right there. He's coming. I thought they would be in the corn further. He's on the tree line checking these trees for scrapes. And I just remember like hooking my release up. I'm making the motions as I'm doing this too. This is kind of funny, but I remember hooking my release up and I'm watching him, and as he's coming through, it's so thick right there on that peripheral to me that, like I said, saplings, and the height of those trees is directly in line with my flight path of an arrow. You know what I'm saying? So I'm peeking through, like trying to see what I'm looking at, and I know where my gaps are. You know what I mean? So I know where I can shoot him, and I knew he was a shooter, and he's checking, he's licking this branch, and he's licking this dang branch, man. It felt like forever. Because as I'm watching him lick this branch, I'm counting, I'm looking at the brows and I'm like, okay, yeah, shooter, big brows. He's for sure. You know what I mean? It's not a question. And
Duh.
he puts his head down and it was like all at once, he was like, it's time to start walking towards this dude. And he starts coming, man. And I remember being like, okay, 20, okay, 15, draw, draw. I'm holding. He's at 10. Find a hole in this tree to shoot this deer because he's getting closer and he's gonna step on you. Like I'm in a tree, but like he's gonna be at the bottom of the tree. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
I'm like, all right, there's my hole, 10 yards, 8. All right, stop. Meh. And I shot and I heard the arrow smack him, right in the spine, and he drops. And
So you shot him from like above.
yeah,
That's crazy. Okay,
not
continue.
that far above though. I was not that high in the tree, maybe 13, 14 feet. So,
Okay. But yeah, but like
uh,
straight down, like you
oh
it's
yeah,
like hard
almost
to
straight
think about
down.
hitting a lung. You just went straight center mass and
Well,
put a spine shot.
I held it low. I wasn't trying to shoot him in the spine. It just,
Okay.
you know, happened. So
Gotcha. Yeah.
I and I shoot him and spine him, and when the arrow hits, he throws his head back and falls to the ground. And when he threw his head back, that's when I could see, because keep in mind everything's been blending in this whole time. And once I saw the bases, I was like, "Don't you look at those antlers." And when I saw his head tip back, Um, and when it hit the ground, it didn't lay flat. Keep in mind, like I told you, Isaac's deer didn't lay flat. So I'm thinking big, nasty, big. You know what I mean? That was my term in my head, like big, nasty, big. Don't settle for
Yeah.
less,
You're about to rename that tree stand to something, whatever this deer is. Yeah, that's
Um,
awesome. Okay.
so I yell, right? I'm like, oh my gosh. And my dad hears me yell because keep in mind he's only 300 yards away maximum. And so he calls me. He's like, "What happened?" I said, "I just smoked one. He's big, nasty, big. He's dead. He's down. He's right here." Because I think I did clip a lung, right? Like he was
Yeah.
bleeding a lot. You know what I mean? So, um, and he's like, "Okay, I'm on my way. I'm on my way." And during this time period, me and my dad used to run bloodhounds, like before tracking dogs were cool. Like we did that. Not to sound like a hipster or nothing like that, but like we would get calls like all the time in November. Hey, we just shot this deer, can't find it. Can you bring your dog? And I'm climbing down the tree, and my like one of my mentors, like on the fishing team, I was bass fished competitively in high school. So he calls me. He's like, "Hey man, you think you can bring that dog over?" I said, "Raymond, I got it. Oh, I just shot a giant." Hung up the phone, and so I get to the bottom of the tree and I see my dad because he's running over. You know what I mean? I told him he was dead right here. And I look at the deer and look at my dad, and I'm like, throw my bow down, run to my dad, hug my dad. Yeah, I'm like, you're not gonna believe how big this deer is. And he gets up to me and I go to look at it, and like by this time the adrenaline's like going crazy, and the group chats obviously knows what's going on. The group chat's blowing up. And so my uncle in Michigan calls me and FaceTimes me. He's like, "How big is it? You know what I mean? I heard you just shot a giant." And I'm like, I'm still shaking, you know what I mean? But I'm holding the phone up, and my dad comes up from behind me. He's like, "Dude, he's got 18 points." And
Wow.
I'm like, no way, right? That doesn't exist. It doesn't exist here. And I go count. Sure enough, man, 18 points. And I take a picture, send them to my buddies on Snapchat, and they're like, I'm like, how big? Well, first of all, I'm like, I just shot a giant, and everyone's like, BS, picker, it didn't happen. Here's the picture, bud. Like, and they're like, oh my God, that's a 180-inch deer. And I remember being like, yeah, man, I don't know what he scores. You know, I never seen a deer this big. And so we get him quartered up, skull cap him, everything, and we go. We take him home, and we've tracked deer on this ranch in Tennessee called Dunaway, and there's a scoring guy there. They have like a scorer and like groundskeeper, and but he scores deer.
Okay.
Like that's part of his job there is to score the deer. And so, because we don't know how to score a deer, you know what I mean? We've every deer we've ever had was scored by a taxidermist, and like we've never like had one where we were like really that curious. And the whole drive home, I don't know if you're familiar with this. It used to be bigger than it is now, but bowhunting.com, like Bowhunter Die, like the show. Um, they posted the picture and it goes crazy viral. So like the whole ride, 18 hours drive home is just my phone blowing up, you know?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah, that's cool.
and people are saying, dude, that's bigger than 180. And I'm like, dude, I don't know. Like, I think it's 170 inches, you know what I mean? Because my only reference is Isaac's deer and he didn't lay flat. So we take him to Dunaway and everyone kind of takes a guess at the score because they had like guys hunting there. And I felt bad bringing this deer there because no one had killed one there that night, and it's a private club. You know what I mean? It's almost like a high. It's not like it's not high fence, but it's almost like those ranches in Texas where they've got like the sheds and everything where they're scoring
Yeah.
deer. And so, Skyler is his name. He comes out. He's like, everyone take a guess. And a couple guys are like, one guy's like
I
170. I'm
love
like,
it.
you're a loser. And another guy's like, I think he's gonna do it. I think he's gonna go 200. And I'm like, no way. Keep in mind, like, I don't care really. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, you're
and
ecstatic regardless.
yeah. And he flipped his little calculator app around and it was 206 and 6/8. And
Woo.
I was like, dude, my life just changed. Like this is crazy. Um and kind of fast forward that he got the nickname the Beast. And so from Ted Nugent, you had Ted Nugent on. I don't know if you ever heard his quote like the beast is dead, long live the beast. That's where that name came from. But
Okay.
um
That's awesome. Okay.
yeah, so um and then this year, my uncle killed one that's not he's not 206, but he's big. I don't know what he scores, but he's gonna be big. Maybe 180. And but that's kind of the story of that farm and just how that's been in our family. But and the story, coincidentally, of my biggest deer that I will ever shoot. Uh, and I will never have a problem with it. But after we killed that on the walk back to the house, my dad was like, "What's next?" You know what I mean? Where do you go from here? Like just joking around. I was like, everyone was kind of like, I guess elk.
Yeah.
And so that'll lead us into, uh, yeah, that'll lead us into this next one. I got stationed in Washington in 2020. Um, this is after I messed around in college and then decided I needed to join the army. And this is the main reason that I felt like compelled to listen to the Jermaine Hodge stuff because he has a very similar background and he didn't really elk hunt before he joined the army, and the army put him around elk. Well, the army put me around elk, so um, I get to Washington, and as you know, it didn't put me around a lot of elk, but
Yeah, they're
they were
there.
there.
Yeah. Yeah, but not a lot of them.
They're there. I remember reading on a forum one time, someone said you have a better chance of killing Bigfoot in this unit than ever seeing an elk. I was like, all right, okay, guess I'm not gonna go there. And
I went hunting
so
for a few years before I saw an elk, and I remember talking with my hunting buddies, being like, "How do I know the difference between a deer and an elk?" And then I saw my first elk, and I was like, "Oh, that's obvious."
I know the
Yeah.
difference. Yep, I see it. And
Yeah.
so uh I got stationed there as a brand new private, man, like living in the barracks and everything. And this is before I was married, so I my mom brought me my bow and my hunting like fishing equipment. Like, cause they wanted to come out and see me one day. So I was like, hey, if you're coming, like, can you bring my stuff? So she
Yeah.
brought my shotgun, my bow, fishing rods, and I remember I bought this clapped out Jeep for like 1,500 bucks. And I remember being like, I'm not gonna every free chance I have, I'm gonna go look for elk. So every weekend for that, I mean, for the season, every single weekend, man, I was out looking for elk all over Washington, North Washington, on the western side, because I knew I was going to hunt the western side because I wasn't going to be able to have the time off to go like plan a trip east.
Okay.
So
So you're going for the Rosies.
I knew I was going to be, yeah. And so I knew I was going to be Roosevelt hunting or Cascade hunting. And so, um, I ended up finding a bunch of elk. And then I got there opening day. And it turns out, well, so I, my buddy Ethan telling him, just like he's in Washington, so um he's like one of the best people I've ever met. Like give you a shirt off his back, but we're like hyped for elk season, right? And so this first day I was like, and I had bulls on camera, big bulls on camera, and I thought I had just hit a slam dunk because this whole time I'm blacktail hunting there. Because you remember the arc deer is like you have like 10 days of September with no elk season, but you can deer hunt. So I'm in the woods in
Yeah.
September, hearing elk bugle and seeing elk while I'm deer hunting in an OTC unit. So I'm hyped. Like I know I've hit a slam dunk. Well, it turns out so did the rest of that county of Washington. Well, the whole western side of Washington, because oh my God, I had never seen so many people hunting in one place. And I remember telling Ethan, like, we hunted that first day, and the only thing we ran into were other hunters, and we actually ran Bigfoot hunters who showed me all their trail camera pictures. There's some giants in there still that never got killed, but um, so I'm like, dude, we need to bomb somewhere else. So we literally like pull up like all the preseason scouting we should have been doing to have a plan B, right? We do in 2 hours at the gas station the night after opening day.
Perfect.
Throw a
Perfect.
dart on the map, and I'm like, dude, let's go. I'll drive. Like we'll take turns driving. Let's go. So we go, man. And as we're pulling into this state land, this big chunk of state land that's bordered by private but walk on timber company land. That effect here later. Um, we jump for elk. I mean, at the like not the trailhead because there's not really a trailhead in like the timberland. Crosses the road at the front on the public. Only have 2 hours until shooting light because we've all night like and taking breaks to nap. So, um, we spooked those elk and I'm like sick. Let's drive 3 more miles into the state land and then hunt there. And up in the morning and all these trucks pass us and I'm like, not again. Where did we see elk? And this is something like I preach on my podcast is like time in the woods is the biggest killer. Like if you can put just time in the woods, not looking, I mean looking for elk, but not you're not looking for anything else. You're just hunting. Like and diligently
Yep.
hunting. That time in the woods is what will kill more than anything. That having the patience to just be there. And so,
I agree. 100%,
um,
man. It's about getting reps.
yep. And so that we drive right back to where we jumped those elk that morning, dark that night, I guess. And I was like, dude, we're not gonna fight the crowd. Like, let's just hunt. So we stopped the truck right there on the side of that logging road and walked into the woods. And I tell you what, man, we walked 300 yards, and Ethan puts his hand out. He's like, "Don't move." He's like, "There's a bull, and it's legal, and it's 50 yards away. Don't move." And he had no idea we were there, and I had no idea. Ethan could see him plain as day. And then we kind of lost sight of him. And there, you know how that country is out there. These little creeks that are 10 feet deep. You don't even know they're there because the ferns are there.
Yeah.
So Like, and he's down in that bottom. So we go, like, I'm standing where we saw this elk. I'm like, where is he? And I look behind Ethan and I'm like, oh my God, there he is. He's 40 yards away. Don't move. Like, and so we start getting into it with this bull calling because he is now dipped up over the hill. So we're trying to call him back to us. During this call in, knowing what I know now that he was raking the whole time, I could have just snuck up the creek bed and probably shot him at 30 yards. I drew back on him at like 45 and he was just, I just didn't have a clear shot. But that was my first, season hunt in Washington. And Ethan missed a cow that year. And so, you know how it is in Washington too. Like you get on these Facebook forums and groups and people are like, yeah, I didn't even see an elk all year. And here I am like thinking like, dude, we just had two encounters. Like I could have shot one if I was better at hunting and Ethan missed one.
Yeah.
Like, like maybe there's something to what we're doing. Maybe there's something to this whole just go hunting thing. And the next year, so fast forward, I'm married now at this point in time, and my baby is due any day now. And my parents had come up because they obviously wanted to be there when my
Yeah.
daughter was born. And so
Is this the first time they were going to be grandma, grandpa?
yes,
Or
yeah, yeah.
okay, yeah, yeah, that's a
So
big deal for them.
oh yeah, and so we're me and my dad are sitting in the house. My mom and my wife are just out shopping or whatever. And he's like, "Do you want to go hunting tonight?" And I'm like, "I mean, I got a spot, but we got to leave right now." And this spot is the same place opening day. Remember, I told you like we couldn't buy a parking spot. You know what I mean? Like there's that many
Yeah.
people there. But this is the middle of the second week of the season. The season's only 2 weeks. So I'm like, "Oh, what can it hurt? Let's do it, man. Let's go." So I throw my camo on, grab my bow, we hop in the truck and go. And I'm like, I got this route, this kind of loop I make there that we can cover ground and we'll get out of here at dark, but we'll be okay. You know what I mean? Like we're not that far. It's not in the back country or nothing. And I was like, but we do stand a strong chance of at least seeing an elk. Just because, over by this time I've had so much time in those woods looking for them, and I kind of knew not their loops or nothing, but I knew when to expect to see them. And it was
Yeah.
like the first cold day in September, and I was like, oh, they should be down. And we start going, and we're hiking this horse trail, and I was like, let's peek off into the riverbed because you can see way up these riverbeds. You know how it is. It's like the
Oh
videos of
yeah.
those guys in British Columbia. It's how the Cascades are. You see way up these riverbeds. And so this is a Cascade Bowl. This is not a coastal. So
It's
because
a
this is
Rocky
right by,
Mountain. Okay.
well, yeah. So um I kind of step out. I'm like, oh, there's three cows right there. They're 100 yards away, and the wind is in our face, and they're not looking at us. Like this is my opportunity to go shoot an elk. So I drop my pack, drop my call, show my dad. I'm like, you see these elk? Because he's not elk hunting, or he was there the year we went, but he didn't really hunt. You know what I mean? They were just coming to visit because I had just moved there. And
Okay.
so um, I'm like, you see him? He's like, yeah, you think you can kill one? I'm like, well, we can try.
Had you
So I
killed
drop my
one? I
pack.
know your buddy killed a cow at this point. Had you put any down up until this point, or
I had
no,
not,
just
no,
been hunting?
I had never killed an elk. I had only
Okay.
the year prior was the first year I ever elk hunted.
Okay.
I grew up turkey hunting, so there's some consolation in that. But um, so I start making my stalk, and I remember it's all these small what the alder trees. It's all these small alder groves on the riverbed, and then up on the bank, you have the pines, like in the old growth. So I started
Hmm.
sneaking through the old growth, and I remember like thinking to myself, I'm like, why is there three cows out here with no bull? And it is the middle. It's almost the end of September, like TikTok, September 20th. What's going on? And I remember like I'm like I look around and like make sure there's not a bull. And so I look up and I just start I have glass on me, so I'm just with my eyes peeking through these alder bushes, and finally I see an antler wave. I'm like, oh, boom, and he's not small. And so and I see him, and he's probably 70. And so I crept up to about 50, and he stands up, and I shoot, and I blow it right. And
Hmm.
um, that one hurt. And so,
I bet.
but that was the only day that was so I hunted opening day. I hunted opening day and I hunted the day after opening day. Other than that, that was the only day I had to elk hunt that year. So, um,
I'm surprised you
as
got out of it all,
crappy
man.
as it
Especially
is
with
to like,
how much later was your daughter born? You said daughter, right?
so yep, I shot at that elk September 18th or 19th, and my daughter was born the 22nd.
That's amazing. My daughter's birthday is October
Yeah,
1st.
yeah,
So I had a similar experience. My wife was like, okay, you got a week at the beginning of September, then get your ass back here. So I,
yeah. You got to be here. Yeah,
yep.
and so thankfully I was right there. Only an hour or so away from house. So, um, but what was cool about that is like the time leading into that, like I had spent in those woods specifically, is what would have killed that bull if I killed him. So I fast forward, I finally this in 2022, I was gonna be able to take leave to hunt. So I put in and I knew kind of where I was gonna be. I knew where I wanted to hunt. Ethan got his time off. I'm like, sweet, let's do it. And so we go and first couple mornings were pretty slow, man. And I keep in mind I'm a weekend warrior up until this point. This is the first time I've ever been able to hunt elk during the week,
Okay.
aside from Labor Day. So um me and my buddy Keenan and Ethan, we hunt this spot and we don't run into any elk, man. We get so torn up in that coastal rainforest, and I had to go home because my leave started the second week. So my vacation is the peak of the season because I wanted to be able to hunt during the rut, hopefully when there'd be less people in the woods. And so we go to the same big stretch of timber from the first year where I had an opportunity. And I remember driving. So it was the 20. So this day was probably the 19th or no, this is probably the 18th. Let's see, 18th, 19th, 20th, 21st. Yeah, 4 days. So it's probably the 18th, probably a couple days into the hunt, right? And me and my buddy Kian, because Ethan couldn't come up, um, we start hunting and we're going into the back of this unit, and it was a dry year in 22. So in my head, I'm like, well, elk need water every day. There's no water on the coast right now. It's all on the rivers, so they're gonna be on the rivers. You know what I mean? Just a rule of thumb, it's good to look by a river for whatever you're hunting for. Um, so we go and we're driving, and I'm like, dude, there's trucks everywhere, everywhere, man. I'm talking, there is more people here than I've ever seen, and I was expecting it to be cleared out by now. And so, you know, I try not to get frustrated, and I'm getting better about it as I go, but like I'm pretty frustrated at this point, you know what I mean? But I do know on the backside of this land is uh is some walk-in timberland that most people don't know that you can hunt. So my hope is that I can drive this logging road all the way to the gate and then hike in and hunt. So about 45 minutes onto this logging road, there's a bridge and it goes down into a canyon. You got to come back up. And I remember like as I turned the corner to start going down into the canyon, there's a car in front of me headed that way. And it's early in the morning, you know what I mean? I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. And they go down and turn around. I'm like, why'd they turn around? And I see they got a rope bridge. So it was about another 2.5 miles back to that uh private walk-on timberland. And so, and a river runs through it, difference. But so I'm I'm pretty mad, but I'm like, all right, this is getting out of here. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so I'm like, this is what we're gonna do. I said, this has worked for me in the past. We're gonna get out of this truck and we're just gonna walk into the woods and hunt. We're just gonna hunt. I don't know. We're not gonna hunt. We're gonna hunt an area, but we are gonna hunt. We're not gonna drive this truck anymore. I'm sick of sitting down. Like, let's just hunt. So we get out, throw our gear on, grab the call, and grab our bows, and we start walking into the woods. I'm like, okay. In my head, Roosevelt's don't have a big home range typically. You know what I mean? They kind of are
Yeah.
homebodies are by nature. because they usually have everything they need within such a tight uh, area. Whereas Roosevelt's, if they have to go to a winter range, or Rocky Mountain's got to go to a winter range sometimes. But so I start looking at little drainages on my Onyx, and I'm like, all right, we're gonna walk above the river, and on the opposite side of the river is a drainage every half a mile, right? We're gonna bugle into each one of these. And so as I'm walking that way, I'm starting to see rubs, old rubs, right? And elk leave a lot of sign. That's another thing, like for people listening, like you'll know when you're around them. Like you're not gonna have a question of if they're there or not. Like it's not gonna be an old rub here, an old rub there. It's tracks, it's crap, it's everything, and you can smell them. And
Yes, you
so
can.
I remember the wind was kind of blowing down into that drainage because the thermals hadn't come up yet. So um, I can catch the wind from the other side of the drainage. And I remember like thinking like, did I just smell a herd elk at one point? As we're not looking at much fresh sign, and then finally we get to this point, and I'm like, dude, there is elk crap everywhere. There's a rub here. We should call. You know what I mean? That's a bright idea. Let's call during the rut.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Let's actually use this thing. So I bugle and I don't hear anything, but Keen is like, dude, no, I'm telling you, he cut you off. He's just far away and you didn't hear him. But there's a bull responding to you right now. And so I call again, and this time I hear him. I'm like, oh my God, did we just get an elk to bugle in Washington? What is going on? And so we're like hyped, like we're high-fiving because now we're in the game. Like we just beat out 97% of the people hunting in Washington because we heard an elk bugle. So, um, like I remember we kind of crossed the river and we go up this bluff and into this reprod, and we made a critical error in doing so because it took us way too long to get there, and by that time he had shut up. So we got out of there. We didn't want to bump him out. So once that thermal started to come up now, in the afternoon, we were like, let's just back out. Don't risk it. We got time. So the next day we come into the same spot, do the same thing, get him to respond again. And I'm like, all right, let's do the same thing again. And it didn't work. Surprise, surprise. So um this is Kean's last day, and Ethan is gonna come hunt the next day with me. It's a Saturday. So Friday Kean has to go home. Saturday, one of my friends of all time, Ethan, he's coming up to hunt with me and call. And I'm telling him, like, dude, I've got a bull found. Like, I've got him found. He's been here 3 days in a row. And so all I've been really waiting on is like the wind to be good in the morning. So instead of going in from the river, I can go in from above him. And by this time I've got like I know what makes the bull respond. Like, 'cause like you hunted with Jermaine. So like you've heard the best calling in the world.
Yeah.
Like, there's certain tones that they won't like. There's tones that they'll hear and be like elk. There's tones they'll hear and be like bugle too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Yep. 100%.
like he would only want to bugle when you hit like a certain pitch as high as you could get on that reed. I mean, and so um me and Ethan get there early in the morning. There's no one there. It's the second to last day of the season. It ends Sunday. And I'm like, dude, let's walk the logging road with the roadblock up. It's gonna take us a minute to get in there, but let's walk it in the dark and we'll just listen. And so we get about half a mile or so from where I think this bull's been hanging out. Um, and we call and we hear these sticks pop. And so I immediately knock an arrow, get ready. Nothing. And it's about 9 o'clock in the morning, or not 9 o'clock, it's about 8 o'clock in the morning. Um, it's getting light enough to really see in the bottom because we're in the bottom of a coastal range canyon. So um, Ethan's like, let me try and bugle and see if he responds. And he bugles. I'm like, no, 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 no. He doesn't respond to that. And so I grab my call and bugle, and he doesn't respond to it. I'm like, well, maybe he's just not here. Let's walk a little further. And and so we walk about another 100 yards, and he bugles on his own. And we're like, oh, you turkey hunt. You know what's going on when a gobbler's bugling or gobbler's gobbling on his own. Like it's time
Yeah,
to go. You know what I mean?
yeah,
This is
he's
your shot. So,
yeah, absolutely. That guy's fired up and ready to talk with you.
yep. So, and if you can picture in your head, you've got the logging road, and it's kind of the shelf of a canyon. So it goes down on your left hand side, on your right hand side it goes up, and you've got these drainages like that I was telling you about a minute ago, where we've been calling into from the other side of the river. So, it's a small river. It's literally a trout stream. So we're calling, or so we call and get him to respond, and he's up in the back of one of these ranges, up these ranges. So um the now the fight's on, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
When you're calling with him, it's go time. So I start we start working our way up. Ethan's 30 yards behind me, you know what I mean? And we're working our way towards his bull, and he's bugling everything, you know what I mean? But he wouldn't come in. And so now we're making cow sounds, and he just won't make a sound, you know what I mean? And at the top of this drainage is a little flat of select cut timber. Select cut being old growth that's thinned out. You know what I mean? And on
okay.
the other side, like the other side of that, 20 yards away is reprod, which you've seen reprod. So like that's our
Yeah, I've seen
border.
reprod.
You know what I mean?
Okay, got it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So that's our like mental border. And we're assuming he's in the reprod. And so um we're like, why is he not calling back? You know what I mean? And looking back, knowing what I know now from turkey hunting, we should have like sat down. He was on his way. You know what I mean? Like when a turkey goes
yeah,
quiet on you, you better be ready and you better not stand up. So, um, we get to the top of this bench, and I'm like thinking like it's like 11 o'clock in the morning now. You know what I mean? Like it's late, and I remember being like, maybe we should like in my head, I'm like, maybe we should take a break, sit down, like eat this tuna fish sandwich I got. You know what I mean? Like, I remember stepping off of this log. And we had made cow
Well, hold
sounds
on,
on
hold
our
on,
way up
Brian.
there just to
You
stop
have
the
a
cup.
you have a tuna fish sandwich in your bag.
Well, yeah, in my truck. Able to go to the Dolly right there in town and get far away. Yeah. But
I
yeah,
would just
I would
never
love a
bring
tuna fish
tuna fish.
sandwich.
I don't have a problem with tuna, but I would never bring a tuna fish sandwich with me into the woods. That's awesome. I hope that it was settled nicely in your stomach. I don't know how long you were out there, but man, good on you.
Well, so um we go, or I step off this log, and I'm about 20 yards from the edge of the reprod, and about maybe it maybe 50 yards like area of this flat, where I have good shooting lanes. And I step off this log, and when I stepped off this log, when I broke a branch, that bull bugle's so close. It was like I could smell it. Like it was so close. And I was like, oh, he was on his way the whole time. Like in my head, I'm like going back to my turkey hunting experience. I'm like, oh, I need to be ready. Like right now, he's gonna bust through this reprod. And so I get about 10 yards, 15 yards in front of Ethan, and Ethan drops back and sits behind the stump. Arrow nock, pack on. Like didn't even have time to take my pack off. Like it's go time. And I hear him cracking brush now. And he I'm watching the edge of the ferns, and there's a big old dead like redwood stump.
Yeah,
And I remember seeing him at like 60 out in the flat, like far away on the other flat, and him breaking through the edge of the ferns at 20. And as I remember being like, when he steps behind that stump, you better be drawn back. You know what I mean? So I draw back when he goes behind the stump, and I'm holding it. And like I don't hold like when I'm holding my bow back, I don't even like aim with it. I just kind of hold it at a comfortable position on my like shoulder. So I'm just like holding it, and he starts coming towards me after he comes past that stump, and he's frontal. You know what I mean? He's coming right at me. I'm like, okay, he's not gonna go broadside. Like he's gonna run you over. Like you better get settled and be ready to shoot. And so I'm at about 15. I'm like, all right, on the, I don't know. kisser buttons, but I'm anchored. And I'm floating my pins. I'm floating my pins. I'm floating my pins. And he kind of turns almost quarter two, but still frontal. And I remember being like, all right, I'm close enough that if this busts through, he's dead. And I put it on the little patch of hair. I was like, all right. And I let it go. And I let it go. And I watched this Easton FMJ go all the way through a frontal shot and go out the other side. And I'm like, oh,
No
that
way.
killed him.
That's awesome.
But in my head, I'm like, he just stands there and turns broadside, but he doesn't off. So I knock another arrow, shoot him in the neck. That's my only shot right there.
Yeah.
Because at this point, I've got an arrow in him. I'm not gonna stop shooting until he's dead.
Yeah. Keep shooting as long as he's on his feet.
Then he gives me yep, and then he gives me another shot. And the shot he gave me this last time was I had to tuck it right behind that last rib and try to tuck it in, faced away from me. This is all within 10 seconds. You know what I mean? And so
Okay.
draw back, let that last one fly, and he kind of starts trotting off at this point, and he trots off about 40 yards, and I'm watching him, and we have this on video. I'll share the video with you
Hell
after the
yeah.
podcast. But so we're watching him, and I'm like, he's 60, you know what I mean? He's 60 yards away, still standing. I'm like, Ethan, throw me an arrow. I'm about to send him. I'm about to send another one at him, and I'm watching him, and he like he buckles down, his knees hit the ground, and he stands back up. But this whole time, I'm just watching this river of blood come out of him. You know what I mean? And I'm like, there's no way. In my head, I'm like, that's fatal, right? But I've never killed an elk, so I'm like, that's what fatal looks like on a deer. Is this gonna kill him? And then he like kind of turns around, knees hit the ground, he stands back up, and as he's standing there, he just throws his head back slowly and falls. And I remember like feeling like the weight of the world, like this self-taught journey to elk hunt. You know what I mean? Like YouTube
Yeah.
University elk hunter. Like I'm watching this come to fruition in front of me, and I just could not like. I let it all go, man. I threw my bow. Ethan's one of my best friends. Like, I hug my friend. Like, I'm tearing up. Like, I'm like, dude, you don't understand. Like, because people see in the video, they see me shooting an elk, but they don't see me driving at midnight to get home because I was in the woods scouting there all weekend. You know what I mean? And I wanted to be there at last light to see where they came out, and then hike out in the dark, and then hike out in the morning in the dark in the middle of summertime. Like, just this insanity and this drive I had for it. Like, I'm watching that come to fruition. So like people see the video, like, dude, you're like tearing up. Like, it's not that serious. It's a raghorn. I'm like, dude, yeah, it's a raghorn, but that is my raghorn, and
Nah.
you don't see the
The effort put in, man. I know exactly what you mean, Brian.
yeah,
I have a 50-second clip on my Instagram right now of the elk I just killed back in September.
monster you
Yeah,
just killed.
yeah, yeah. He ended up being, I think, 312. So pretty
Oh
good
yeah,
sized bull. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And he's got three of his tines are like a little funky, a little bit more of a like a almost like a knife more so than a
Yeah,
spear. They're
bladed
super
out.
unique. Yeah, yeah. And the
That's
thing
what my
about them,
Rosie had on his
that's cool.
brows.
But the thing about those three, like if they were equal to the ones on his right side, I mean, he's a 330, 340 bull. So
Oh
he's
yeah,
just got some character. He's a stud. I love him. But the video is 50 seconds and it's everything, right? It's all of this work that I put in. But you're right, man. I've been hunting for 7 years, 7 years of elk hunting to try and make that happen. And when it happened, like we cut the video and I'm just like I'm picking Jermaine up, I'm throwing him around, I'm hugging Pat, I'm just
oh
like
little Jermaine. Jermaine's only like what 5'8", so imagine
give or take,
throwing
we'll,
him
we'll say
around.
we'll say 5'10" for the record, just because I'm not really sure. But yeah, compared to I'm 6'4", so compared to me, he's not quite as large. That's what we'll say.
Yeah, yeah.
But either way, man, you're 100% right. It's all that effort you put into it. It's years and years of effort, and like hundreds of miles on your feet for seconds of that moment. And so it's
Oh
pretty
man,
special.
it's the craziest. Like, and that's like I almost feel bad for guys who like come out here and do it on their first year because it's like
Or do it every year.
or
They don't get that same high that we get.
yeah. Well, I came close this year. I was trying to be picky, and now I'm eating tag soup. But I mean, I kill enough whitetail at home, so it's not a problem. But I had a pretty good hunt this year. I just had the spot and stalk of all things in Colorado. Like I did not expect to be hunting spot and stalk elk here, but I almost killed one. I was pretty almost killed a good one on OTC. But I was this year was just it was weird, man. Because I guess it was because I was getting used to hunting Rocky Mountain elk,
Yeah.
and you know, like also coming from Washington, like there's this like level of confidence I had to teach myself when I walk into the woods that the elk are actually going to be there. You know what I mean? Like you have to convince yourself, like, well, they might be in this unit before you even step foot in the woods. And now
Especially in
here,
Washington. Yeah.
yeah, now here in Colorado, the highest elk population in the country. So like, I know they're there. I don't need to be told that the elk are there. I know they're there. So like, it was so weird being like,
Yeah, they're there, but now there's twice the amount of hunters, and you were worried about the hunter volume in Washington.
yeah, there's a lot more hunters here. But this is not to knock any first year hunters, but most of them are like that first year hunter. And I found that you can rely on your, I hate saying the word woodsmanship, but if you rely on that, man, in that time in the woods stuff that we were talking about earlier, I think it's the same. I do. Like, I
I
think you
agree.
could take that thing, I think you could take it from Washington to Colorado to Montana to, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, I think it's also a matter of like putting in work. Like a lot of guys, I know plenty of hunters that aren't there necessarily to kill an elk. They're there to go hunting and just be away from their day to day, whatever that is, whatever
yeah,
they're
and they
getting away
find their
from.
peace in the woods, and that's cool too. You know what I mean? If
Yeah,
that's your thing, that's your thing. But I'm there to pull the trigger.
yeah. Getting drunk at camp, whatever it might be. But if you're willing to like throw miles on your feet, have some pretty crappy, well, let me just say it, some pretty shitty hikes in and out,
Oh yeah,
go in the dark, come back in the dark.
try to hunt an elk
You,
in
you won't
bighorn
see
country.
as many hunters as they say you're going to see, right? So it's all
Oh
about
yeah,
putting in more work
and
than.
and another thing is too, when you meet those guys back there, like where you don't think you'll see other hunters, that's the person you need to keep in contact with. Like that's a phone number you need to
100%.
get because if they're willing to do that, you know what I mean? Like I met a group of guys back there this year that were hunting elk the same way I was. So I was like, hey, this is my phone number. You can kill one, call me. If I kill one, I'll call you. And you can build that rapport with guys. I think that's pretty important too. You know what I mean?
100%.
Like just having the confidence that you can call somebody to get your elk out and you don't have a limiting factor,
Yep.
you're in.
For sure,
In
man.
my opinion, I feel like I'm in when that happens, but
No, I'm with you. I've met some people pretty deep into the woods, and they're always fun to talk to, and they're always pleasant. It's the people
I
at the
can't believe I
trailheads that
saw
are.
you back here.
Yeah, right.
I
Yeah,
can't believe someone
yeah,
else found this. Well, brother,
yeah.
on X
Absolutely,
exists.
man.
So
Absolutely. Cool. Well, man, that's an awesome story. I love the emotion that you not only have with your story, but that you hunt with, man. Um, I can say there's a lot of hunters that don't have that. The ones that do are the ones that I love to be around. So that's really great, Brian. I know you. I think you maybe said you had 2, 3 stories. Do you have some more for us?
um
I don't want to
I
cut you off
had
before you're done
I
here.
had one more, but you're moving to Colorado soon enough. We'll just do it in person.
Hell yeah, brother. Okay. Well, then let's do this, man. Let's tell the people where they can find you. I don't know if you have any social media stuff, or I know you obviously have a
Yeah.
podcast. Fill them in so that they can kind of check in on you and see what you're up to.
So yeah, if you wanna for any of you guys in like Colorado Springs, like by the way, I don't like know anybody here really. So if you're in Colorado Springs listening to this, you want to link up, shoot, fly fish, hunt, let me know. Let's do it.
Hell
My
yeah! So my
Instagram is
hunting buddy lives in Colorado Springs, so I'll connect you with him directly.
oh for sure, dude.
Yeah,
Yeah, that'd be sweet because like I said, I got stationed out here to hunt and I don't really know anybody here. So like this year, like elk hunt, I have friends and like family in like Gypsum, Colorado, but that's over by Grand Junction, so that's a long way
yeah.
away. But um yeah, so Instagram at Bryan Speller, BryanSpeller. I guess Facebook too if you're into that. But Instagram's probably like the best way if you wanted to reach me. Um I have a podcast. It's Bulls and Bass. Probably need to change the name of that because I don't really bass fish anymore. I live in Colorado,
A lot
and
of
I fly
trout.
fish.
Yep.
Yeah, I like my trout now. I'm actually tying flies as we speak. Well, not as we speak, but um, I got my stuff here. But yeah,
Gotcha. So let me ask about that. So I knew you had one. I don't know much about it. How long has it been going? What do you try and cover in your podcast? How often does it come out? That kind of stuff.
so I'm trying to do it weekly or bi-weekly.
Okay.
It's more so like I guess theories in hunting and kind of getting on the tangents about different stuff. Like I have a podcast completely dedicated to like the time in the woods topic, where I basically got on there like I don't know if you're familiar with this past weekend in Theo Von where he just has a solo podcast, but I get on there and just kind of ramble and rant my thoughts into what sounds somewhat coherent, for people to understand
Okay.
and like just
Okay.
because like I'm not gonna say I'm an expert at anything, but I spend a lot of time in the woods, and I feel like um, there's a lot of knowledge that could be subsequently gained by listening. You know what I mean? Not that I'm an expert
Yes.
in anything. I could, but I have a passion for teaching, so that's kind of where that comes into. But yeah, bulls and bass. Uh, but if like it, I mean, I'm always looking for guests, so hit me up if you want to get on there and talk
Cool,
anything
man.
really. Bass fishing, duck hunting, turkey hunting. Love turkey hunting.
There we go. I will. I'll put links to all of this in the show notes. So anybody who wants to connect with them, especially folks down in the Springs area of Colorado, just click on it and reach out. But Bryan, man, this was fun, man. Like I said, you have a unique passion with your stories. It's like you said. I think it was about halfway through your deer story. You're like, oh man, I'm like shaking here. So like, I love that. I love that. I
Yeah.
love that those experiences mean so much to you, and that's exactly why I started the podcast, brother. So thank you for coming on and sharing your stories with everybody.
Yeah, man. Thank you for having me so much. This has been fun.
All right, guys, that's it. Another couple stories in the books. Again, I want to thank Bryan for coming on the podcast. I also want to say Merry Christmas to everybody out there. I think I forgot to do that on the intro, but this episode is coming out on Christmas Day. I hope you guys enjoy it. I hope you're enjoying time with your family. I hope you enjoyed Bryan's stories. Thank you guys again for another great year. This was a lot of fun putting all of this together this year. Guys, if you do have stories and you want to share them, hit me up. I'd love to have you on. Again, check us out on Carbon TV. Give us ratings there. Give us ratings on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you're listening. If you could give us a review, I would very much appreciate it. But that's it, guys. Thanks again for checking us out. Thank you, Bryan, for telling your stories. Now get out there and make some stories of your own. Thank you.